I never thought I'd be the kind of person with a story like this, the kind that sounds made up when you say it out loud at a dinner party, but here it is, exactly as it happened, and I still get a little short of breath telling it. 12 years ago, I was 22 years old and completely stupidly in love with a guy named Everett Sloan, my college boyfriend of 3 years, the person I genuinely believed I was going to marry. We met freshman year at Ohio State in a shared econ class neither of us wanted to be in, and somehow built an entire relationship out of study sessions and cheap pizza and long walks around campus talking about the lives we were going to have. He wanted to go into finance. I wanted to open a catering business, something small and personal, built around the recipes my grandmother had taught me growing up in a Lebanese American household outside Cleveland. We fell apart the way a lot of college relationships do, slowly and then all at once, in the 6 months leading up to graduation. Everett got a job offer in New York, a good one, the kind that sets a career in motion. I had roots in Ohio. My grandmother was getting older, my catering dream was starting to take actual shape with a couple of small local clients, and neither of us was willing to be the one who gave something up. We had the conversation everyone has in that situation, the we both know this is the right choice even though it hurts conversation, and then we didn't speak again. Not one text, not one call, not even the passive half-life of social media, because I deleted every account I had within a year, partly for unrelated reasons, and partly, if I'm honest, because I didn't trust myself not to check on him. I built my life from there, slowly, the way you build most real things. My catering business, Amara's Table, named after my grandmother, started as weekend gigs out of my apartment kitchen and grew over a decade into a small but respected operation known around Cleveland and increasingly Columbus for high-end private events. It wasn't glamorous work most of the time. I was in the kitchen at 5 a.m. more days than not. I hauled chafing dishes up service stairs in heels I regretted by hour two. I built the whole thing with my own hands, the same slow, stubborn way I'd rebuilt everything else in my life after Everett. I also changed my name, legally, about 6 years ago, from Marina to Amara, a shift back to a family name my grandmother had always preferred, done partly in her honor after she passed, partly as its own small act of reinvention that felt important at the time and still does. It matters to this story only because it's a big part of why what happened next was even possible. The event was a corporate engagement dinner in downtown Columbus, booked through a client referral. Nothing unusual about it on paper. 40 guests, a private dining room at a boutique hotel, the kind of upscale but manageable job my team could run in our sleep by that point. I wasn't originally supposed to work the floor myself that night. I usually stayed back in the kitchen for events that size and let my front of house staff handle service. But one of my servers called in sick that afternoon, and rather than scramble to find a replacement on short notice, I put on the black service uniform myself and stepped onto the floor for the first time in months. I recognized him before he recognized me, obviously, because I was the one walking toward his table with a tray of champagne, and he was the one sitting there in a beautifully tailored charcoal suit laughing at something his fiancée had said, completely unaware that the woman about to refill his glass had once known the exact sound of his laugh well enough to pick it out of a crowded room. 12 years does something to a face and a body without erasing the parts that matter. He looked older in the good way, more settled into himself, a little gray starting at his temples, the same easy warmth in his expression that I remembered from 22-year-old Everett arguing with me over macroeconomics on cold pizza. I set the champagne down at his place setting, said the standard, practiced enjoy that I say at every table I serve, and he looked up at me and smiled politely, the smile you give someone doing their job well, and said thank you and went right back to his conversation. He did not recognize me, not a flicker. Different name on my catering company, different last name entirely since I'd never taken his and hadn't gone by Marina professionally in years, hair a completely different color and length than it had been at 22, and I think simply a total absence of expectation. Nobody looks for their college girlfriend inside a catering uniform at someone else's engagement dinner. I served that entire table for the rest of the night. I refilled his water glass twice. I cleared his dessert plate. I stood 4 feet from him while his fiance's father gave a toast, and Everett laughed at the same self-deprecating jokes he used to make about himself in college, and I felt something in my chest that I hadn't let myself feel in over a decade. A strange, complicated ache that wasn't jealousy exactly, and wasn't grief exactly, but some third thing made out of both. I want to be honest that I had a choice that night, and I made it deliberately. I could have said nothing at all, finished the event, gone home, and let this be a strange, private story I never told anyone. Instead, near the end of the night, while most of the guests had drifted into the lobby bar and Everett was alone for a moment settling the final details with the hotel coordinator, I walked over and I said his name. Just that, Everett. The look on his face when he actually looked at me really looked, past the uniform and the tray and 12 years of expectation-defying context, is something I don't think I'll ever fully be able to describe. It moved through about 4 stages in the space of 2 seconds: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and then something that looked almost like the floor had genuinely shifted under him. "Marina?" he said. And it had been so long since anyone called me that hearing it in his voice again felt like being handed something I'd forgotten I still owned. We talked for maybe 10 minutes, standing awkwardly near the coat check while catering staff and hotel employees moved around us breaking down the event. It was, on paper, exactly the kind of run-in you'd expect: surprised laughter, a rushed, compressed summary of 12 years each, an exchange of, "You look amazing, you look happy, tell me everything," that no 10-minute conversation could ever actually accommodate. He told me he was engaged to a woman named Priya, a corporate attorney, that they'd been together 3 years, and the wedding was set for the following spring. I told him about Amara's table, about my grandmother, about the name change, and the decade of 5 a.m. mornings that got me here. We didn't linger on the relationship itself, on what happened or why, both of us instinctively understanding that this was neither the time nor the place to dig into any of that. We exchanged numbers, the way you do with an old friend you're glad to have run into, and I went home that night feeling strange and unmoored in a way I didn't fully examine until much later. Here's the part of the story that surprises people most. Nothing scandalous happened. I didn't destroy his engagement. He didn't leave Priya for me in some dramatic third-act reunion. I want to be clear about that up front because I know exactly what kind of story this sounds like it's building toward, and it isn't that story. What actually happened is smaller, and I think better. We texted a little over the following weeks, genuinely, purely as old friends catching up, nothing that crossed any lines. He asked thoughtful questions about the business. I asked about his life in New York, then Columbus, where he'd relocated for Priya's career. About 6 weeks after the engagement dinner, he sent me a message that read simply, "Priya wants to hire you for the wedding. She saw your Instagram, doesn't know the history, just thinks your food looks incredible." I told her that was probably a bad idea for obvious reasons, but she insisted I at least ask. No pressure either way. I sat with that message for a long time before I responded. In the end, I said no gently and explained to Everett, not to Priya, that while I was genuinely happy for them and grateful for the encounter, catering my ex's wedding felt like more emotional weight than I needed to carry, and I thought it was probably more weight than the day itself needed too. He agreed immediately, relieved, I think, that I'd made the call so he didn't have to be the one to. That could have been the natural end of it, a closed loop. A strange full-circle night, a story I'd tell at dinner parties for years. But about 4 months after that, Everett reached out again, this time to tell me plainly that the wedding was off. Not because of me, he was careful and specific about that, and I believed him, but because the encounter with me, he said, had cracked something open that he and Priya had both been quietly ignoring for a while, that they were compatible and comfortable and fond of each other, but that neither of them had ever felt about the other the way, in his words, I apparently still feel about a woman I hadn't spoken to in 12 years, which is an insane thing to admit and probably says more about my own denial than anything else. I didn't jump into anything with him immediately, and I want to be honest that I was cautious because reconnecting with someone whose broken engagement in your recent history isn't exactly a clean slate to build on. We spent nearly a year just talking, slowly, the way you rebuild trust with someone you once knew completely and now have to learn all over again as different people. We went on our first actual date 14 months after that catering event at a small restaurant neither of us had any history with, deliberately neutral ground. We've been together for a little over a year now. He proposed 4 months ago, in my grandmother's old kitchen, the one where Amara's table technically began, which felt like the only right place it could have happened. I still don't fully know what to make of the odds of it all, that I'd end up serving champagne at a random Tuesday night event on a table that happened to hold the one person from my entire past I never expected to see again on a night I almost didn't work at all. People ask me sometimes if I believe in fate, and I still don't know how to answer that honestly. What I believe in is this: I built a whole life, brick by brick, without waiting around for him, without holding a door open for a reunion I never expected to happen. And somehow, because I was standing exactly where my own hard work had put me, the door opened anyway.